Okay, I'm recording. And
Me too.
Yep.
Me too.
okay. You're listening to episode 48 of the Station 71 podcast. My name is Mario, and this week I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Beth?
Brian?
And Kirsten.
And this week we're going to be taking a little bit of a listener suggestion. We've been kind of getting this a lot. A lot of people want us to talk a little bit more about Disney animated movies and stuff outside of the park. So we're going to take a break from the parks this week and talk a little bit about that. But first, as always, let's dive into our news topics for this week. So first up, it looks like we got some new Halloween merchandise coming to Walt Disney World and Disneyland in 2018. Feels so weird that we're already hearing about Halloween.
Well, man, the parties are about to start, so we gotta get this out there.
I know, right? I was talking to a friend about going for Labor Day, and he's like, "Are you going to the Halloween party?" And I was like, "I don't think they start this early." And he's like, "Yeah, there's one like the day after Labor Day." And I was like, "What?"
I know, it's crazy. I don't see how people get in the Halloween spirit like this early in the game. I'm
just
definitely
doesn't-
waiting.
It just doesn't feel right to me to go to a Halloween party not in October.
Mm-hmm.
But I probably won't go in October, so if I do go for Labor Day, maybe we'll make an exception.
Yeah, I think my next one after this one I'm planning is going to be another Halloween party trip. But let's talk about this merchandise. So we've got a Oogie Boogie popcorn cup, some poison apple floating cubes, another one of those poison apple cups for like the sundaes, and a headless horseman straw clip. Interesting stuff. I like the poison apple merchandise for some reason. I'm very drawn to that. And
Yeah.
it looks like the poison apple Stein is green this year instead of
Yeah.
red.
This Stein looks really cool. I'm loving that one.
I have the red one. It's sitting on my desk right next to me.
I'm
But-
about to say those were like a hot commodity last year.
Man,
Whenever they started.
yeah. Now I got to get the green one just to complete the set. But
That's
gonna
how
be
they
the
get
yellow
you,
one.
man.
what was that?
I said that's how they get you, man.
That is like just looking at the red one. I'm like, that would look so good with the green one next to it.
I'm really into this ice cube.
Oh
I
yeah.
like to collect the different cubes. So
I
might have to get that.
I've also noticed that the popcorn holders seem to be a huge thing. Like, I mean, obviously they've been flying off the shelves, but Disney's been doing a lot of the popcorn holders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I have a question mainly for Beth about this straw clip, because I've tried really hard to stop using plastic straws just because they're so bad for the environment. And Disney is apparently, going to quit using plastic straws. But now they're adding these straw clips, which are made out of plastic. And I feel like, do you feel like it's just replacing like, oh, here's one disposable thing with another disposable plastic thing that you have to pay for? Because I'm kind of like, okay, what's the point of even getting rid of the plastic straws?
So
Like-
I've got a theory. We were talking about this a little bit ago about how like the weird thing about the whole plastic thing is that Disney said that it's not going to start until like mid 2019.
No, that's when it's going to be, that's when they're aiming to be completely strawless.
Right. So we're thinking that like they probably have a surplus of straws. And maybe
I can guarantee you they do. I've been in stores.
So I'm thinking that like this might be their way to push more straws out. Like buy a straw clip and you need a straw, or obviously you're going to need the straw to go with it. So if they're pushing more straws out, they can probably go strawless sooner.
But they're selling like reusable straws, or like.
Oh, see, I didn't see that.
I don't know. Aren't they? I would assume that they would still have a straw. They would just move to paper straws everywhere, or else sell like reusable straws.
Yeah, and like this straw topper thing looks like significant enough to where a regular plastic straw is probably not going to hold it very well. So I would imagine that they're made specifically for the reusable straws.
And which that brings me to the point of how many people are going to buy a reusable straw and then forget and throw it away. everybody.
Yeah.
I'm glad they're going strawless, or
Right.
plastic strawless. I do think that's a really good thing. But like, I don't know if they're really correcting the whole, environmental aspect.
Yeah, and I can see that. My only argument would be that because people are going to have to purchase the straw, that they're going to be less likely to want to just toss it. I'm assuming that they're not going to be super expensive or anything, but you know how people are at Disney. It's like, you paid for this thing, you're going to get the most out of it. So I would imagine that people would hang on to these straws at least for the duration of their trip.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have like a million reusable plastic straws and I like keep them in my car specifically for that reason.
Yeah.
So, next news story that we've got is that the Walt Disney announced their third quarter earnings for 2018, and they're showing gains in the parks and the resorts, which I guess we're not really super surprised by.
I'm upset about it because it means they think they can just keep doing what they're doing and getting away with it.
I mean, they can.
I mean, I know they can, but I don't want them to.
No, I think that's the biggest thing. If you look at this article, that attendance was only up 1%. Yeah, so almost all of this is getting driven by higher costs, not necessarily more attendance.
Yep. So that was kind of what I wanted to talk about. It's weird to see that with the earnings being up and the park traffic percentage being kind of low, that really does mean that Disney can keep driving the price and people are still going to keep going.
Here's the most important sentence in this whole thing. And I hear this stuff all the time. I work for a hedge fund. Mr. Bob Iger says that we're pleased with our results this quarter, including a double-digit increase in earnings per share. That's all that matters to them.
Yeah. If the shareholders are happy, then they're going to continue the same way.
Yep.
I do have a fun little tip for everyone out there. If you buy literally one share of Disney, they still have to include you in like everything. So my dad bought me a share for a Christmas gift a few years ago, and I get mail all the time. Like, it's literally one share, which is, I don't know, it's like $100 something. But I literally got a copy of the Disney and 21st Century Fox merger, and I had to vote on it, even though I only have one share. So if you ever want to be in the know, just drop $100. You got it for life.
The cool thing about that is I'm pretty sure you can also, like, if you really look into it, I think you can like hear these calls and stuff too, like the shareholder calls.
Oh yeah, you can go to the investor relations page and they should have all of that stuff. It's pretty easy to find. You probably look up their slide deck too.
Huh. So you could really be in on this and actually hear all that. So if you really did want to have all of those details, you could.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I tried to read the merger. I read parts of it. It was literally like a book. And I was like, I have no idea what most of these terms mean. So I feel like that would be the thing that would happen if I listened to the phone call too. But
lots of legal mumbo jumbo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So next up, we have character lineup announced for Disney PhotoPass Day 2018. PhotoPass Day is August 19th, 2018, and they're going to have some special characters, some magic shots, and pricing on One Day Memory Maker for guests that want to take advantage of this. It's a kind of cool opportunity if you're really into characters. There's different PhotoPass shots and stuff in each of the parks. Disney Springs has a Peter Pan shadow magic shot, original selfie magic shot, special balloons virtual background. Animal Kingdom has Bolt is going to be out.
Aww.
And
thank you.
She's just mad because we were
hating on Bolt after the show last week.
Oh, I love Bolt.
Thank you.
Excuse me, do I hear laughter from Mr. Country Fears?
Oh, come on. Country Bear Jamboree is far, far better than Bolt.
False.
Hostility's already coming out. Wow.
I've been on your team for a long time, Brian, but that was uncalled for.
So anyway, Baloo and King Louie are also going to be out, but I feel like they're out all the time. Photo opportunities include Huey, Dewey, and Louie Magic Shot, Kevin Shot, Russell's Grape Soda bottle cap pin prop near the Upward Great Adventure, Finding Nemo prop, Kilimanjaro Safari prop. Hollywood Studios has Jawas for the at Launch Bay. There's going to be
always have
some of these things I'm looking at it and I'm like, I feel like a lot of this is
they're just trying to pad the opportunities,
right? Like, so there's also the Rizzo Magic Shot, Green Army Man Magic Shot, Hollywood Tower Hotel luggage prop. I feel like the luggage prop is there. Or at least I've seen that one before.
I've definitely seen pictures of people.
There's a Beauty and the Beast light painting. That sounds kind of cool. Epcot has Cruella de Vil, Jafar, and then original selfie magic shot, World Traveler magic shots, Baby Groot magic shot, another Finding Nemo prop, and a Spaceship Earth prop. And then lastly, the kind of the least exciting of all of them, Magic Kingdom has Pinocchio and Geppetto, which I guess they're kind of a rare character meet and greet. You get a Dole Whip shot, so I guess, Beth, you should probably head down there. Dumbo magic shot, Mickey magic shot, Jungle Cruise prop, and a pretzel prop.
I'm kind of surprised at how little they're doing in Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, there's not really much in there.
Yeah, maybe it's because they don't need any help getting bodies in that park.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about all of this, if you do want to take advantage of the Photo Pass for one day, you can buy the the Memory Maker at any Photo Pass center for the special price of $39.99 only on August 19th. So that's kind of a nice little thing. You get a discount on it.
I mean, honestly, if you just happen to be there on that day and don't even do any of these special opportunities, it's a really good deal.
Yeah.
But this is definitely not something that I would like make a special trip for, but if I happen to be there at the same time, it'd be pretty cool.
I feel like last year it might have been bigger. I don't know why I feel that way, but I feel like it was.
Yeah, I feel like they had more like rare characters out last year. Whereas I feel like these characters, like most of the things are magic shots and props anyway, but the only like really unique characters that you don't see all the time, I think, are Bolt and like Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
And Cruella de Vil.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I guess Jafar, too.
I have a picture with Cruella, which I'm kind of proud of, considering I don't really care about pictures. She's pretty rare.
I was going to say, for someone that doesn't care about characters, that's really impressive.
Well, so they do a formal for every semester of the college program. Actually, I think they changed it, and now one semester gets a formal and one gets a pool party. We had a formal, and it was like villains themed, so they had a bunch of the villains out that we could meet. Like I met Maleficent, Cruella. They had Hades out.
Oh, cool.
I don't remember who else. Basically, all the villains that you can think of.
That is really cool.
Yeah. I met Cruella at a Club Villain, but that's the only time I've ever seen her available. And that was a paid for thing. So.
So I looked up the list from last year, and I am actually really kind of upset about this now. Last year, Magic Kingdom had Cinderella's Coach and the Tangled Floating Lights photo op thing, which kind of stuck around. Genie joined Jasmine in Morocco. Mushu was with Mulan in Epcot.
Whoa, how did they do Mushu? Is that like a magic shot, or was there a...
No, it's a character.
So that was not like to scale at all.
No, not even close.
No, they like painted a like bearded dragon red, trained it to meet and greet.
That would actually be pretty cool.
That would be interesting.
It'd be really cool if they could teach the dragon to say "dishonor on you."
But in Animal Kingdom, which I just realized now that this list does not have Hollywood Studios, so that should tell you something. But Princess Ada from A Bug's Life and Flick were near Creature Comforts, and Miko was with Pocahontas. So, also Timon was with Rafiki at Rafiki's Planet Watch. So I feel like there was.
Rare?
I don't feel like I've seen him a lot.
I feel like he used to always meet with Pocahontas at Animal Kingdom.
He might have.
I don't know. I definitely have seen him, but maybe they stopped or something.
Yeah, no idea. But in comparison, that's like there's not a lot of characters.
Mm-hmm.
So are we ready to move on to the last one?
Yeah.
So Star Wars Galaxy's Edge construction photos started popping up on the internet. We kind of have to talk about this because we talked about the Toy Story Land construction for like weeks on end. But as someone that hasn't been there, just by seeing the pictures, I am not surprised at all by these coming out because it looks like Disney is not trying to hide this in the slightest bit.
You know, when I went, there wasn't even as much built up as there are in these pictures, but I noticed it straight off the bat. Like, this is bad. They're not putting up nearly tall enough of a wall or doing anything else really to, block off the sight lines. And these pictures are even worse from when I was there. I can only hope that, when they get closer to this actually opening, that there's something there separating these two lands, because this looks pretty bad.
Yeah. I had a friend that was just recently down there, and he sent me pictures. He was like, I don't know if you guys have talked about Toy Story Land yet, but from the entrance, I can already see Galaxy's Edge popping up. And I was like, that's not good at all.
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to conceal that?
I mean, the things that I'm thinking of, it's like, well, you're either going to make it where you block Galaxy's Edge with more Toy Story stuff, but then if you do that, then you're going to be able to see it from Galaxy's Edge. So, I feel like the way that Slinky Dog Coaster kind of wraps around almost the entire land, that at the end of it, I think you're still probably going to be able to at least see Slinky Dog from Galaxy's Edge, but I don't know, unless they can get some trees in there or something. It's gonna kind of break the immersion, I feel like.
Well, I think that they go ahead.
I was just gonna say maybe they have some tricks up their sleeve, like how they like did the back of Tower of Terror, so that when you see it from Morocco, it looks like it is supposed to be there. So
yeah, I mean
that would be a really stark difference to have Toy Story on one side and Star Wars on the other, but maybe they can make that work.
I mean, they've done it with bridges. Like if you sometimes, you enter a bridge in Fantasyland and come out in like, what's it called? Liberty Square. You don't really notice, but I don't know. That's a lot to hide. We just all need to tweet Joe Rohde and get on it.
He'll fix it.
I mean, this isn't an Animal Kingdom, so we might be lost there.
He's like, that's not my park.
But that's an interesting point. Like, even if they plant trees, that seems like a lot of ground to cover. How far is it from Toy Story Land to where like the wall for Galaxy's Edge is?
I feel like in this picture, it makes it look a good bit closer than it was. I don't know offhand, but I know this picture makes it look almost like, oh, once they tear this wall down, like you'll be in Galaxy's Edge. But there was a good bit of space between it. It's enough that I think that, if they do go like the tree route or something, that they will have enough space to do them tall enough and basically thick enough so that you won't see through it. But I'm also hoping they have a more creative solution, kind of like Kirsten was saying.
I'm looking at the map to see if there's any, like, when the satellite was updated, but we can come back to that.
Really well, like I said, I had a friend that was down there and he sent me those pictures, and like looking at it from his point of view, I'll send you guys these. There looks like there's a good bit of distance from like where he's standing and the wall that's just empty. And I'm kind of hoping that that's the case, because like then maybe they can actually build some kind of transition. I don't know.
So I'm curious to see how they transition from Toy Story to Star Wars, but they can pull it off. I'll be impressed.
That was always kind of my big worry when we started talking about this. Like, how are they going to do that with them so close?
I know. And it's the worry if Disney even cares about that in Hollywood studios.
That's also true, because we were even talking about it with Muppet Vision. Like, Muppet Vision's so close to Star Wars that it's like...
It's in the middle, which is the issue now, is it's sandwiched right in between Star Tours and the entrance to Galaxy's Edge.
Right.
So I am so confused as to what they're going to do with that, because I thought the whole thing was that, you know, there was going to be this big, like, to-do about how you entered into Galaxy's Edge, and now one of Galaxy's Edge's rides isn't going to be in that entranceway. So I don't know.
I mean, unless they just pick it up and move it, but that would take too much work.
Yeah.
Any update on that satellite?
No, I found some aerial photos that I'm going to send, like just a link to some, but I have this stupid rainbow wheel, so.
Well, I was just scrolling through these pictures and I noticed that the archway is still up, that they were talking about like how you're going to enter through it. And it looks like there's a lot of trees planted around that. So maybe they're going to go that route. I don't know. Like there's so much to think about.
It looks like all the tall stuff is really as far back as possible, though. So
that's true.
I mean, maybe that'll help.
It's a lot of building. Wow. All right. So are you guys ready to talk about some Disney movies?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So this is going to be a little weird because we've never done anything that's not super park related. But we've been getting a lot of questions about maybe doing some like Disney movie superlatives or talking about Disney music and stuff like that. And this kind of stemmed from a listener question we read on last week's episode where he wanted to know what our favorite Disney song was. And we kind of thought, well, there's so many different kinds of Disney songs. How can we really sum that all up into one? So this week, we're going to take some time to talk about some Disney animated films and discuss maybe some history with the Disney company, because, you know, we all like to do that here. So we've broken this down by Disney eras, and we're going to try to make this as cohesive as possible through each era of Disney. We'll see where we end up with all of this, but first one that we wanted to talk about was like the silent film era and like the start of Disney animation. I'm going to turn that over to Beth because it looks like you have the most stuff in here.
Yeah, so this is, even with all the stuff that I wrote down, I feel like it's still very brief for how much information actually is out there. But just to, I guess, talk about Walt's kind of beginnings in animation, he first signed a contract in 1921 to create a series of cartoon joke reels in Kansas City for a local theater chain, and they were called the Newman Laugh-O-Grams. And these topics were like the city life in Kansas City's like fashion and the like transportation conditions, like potholes, and there was even like a police scandal in one of them. So it was more of like a editorial like cartoon that you'd see in like a newspaper, but just an animated version. So after that, he actually started a studio of his own and called it Laugh-O-Gram, which was after the Laugh-O-Grams that he had made. They were contracted to make 6 animated shorts, and the Pictorial Club of Tennessee was who contracted with them. And they said they were going to pay $11,000 for the 6 cartoons, but we're only going to pay $100 in advance with the intention of paying the rest when all 6 were finished and had been delivered to them. but unfortunately the company went bankrupt a few months later and had never paid the remainder of the contract. So Walt didn't have the capital to keep his studio going, and all of the staff had to leave for paying jobs because they had bills. So Walt, you know, the dreamer that he was, kept on pushing, and he survived on checks that Roy was sending him. And he lived inside the studio and ate on a credit at a Greek restaurant that was on the first floor where the studio was. So in 1922, Walt was approached by a local dentist to create a live-action educational film for $500, and it was called Tommy Tucker's Tooth. So instead of paying the debt with the profits that he made, he decided to invest it, which I feel like was a very common theme with Walt. He was always taking money that he could be paying debt and using it to put it into the next thing. But
you know, that's funny to think. Just like, I mean, hindsight's 2020, but at the time, it's like, dude, you just lost all this money trying to do these pictures. You finally recoup some of it back, and you immediately start doing this again. But
right,
it paid off.
I'm sure we're gonna hit that big time though, because that's like you said, that's a really common theme here, and it's funny to think about that. Like, there's so many times in the history of like Disney animation where they could have gone broke and they could have lost everything, and it was always riding on the next movie, and then the next movie came out, and it was like huge success.
And it's crazy to think how close they came so many times to just absolutely going under.
I just feel like it wouldn't work as well today. Like, I feel like it was just a different time. Even just like eating on credit at a restaurant. I mean, what restaurant would let you do that today? Just, I don't know, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. So after,
go ahead, sorry.
So after Tommy Tucker's Tooth, like I said, he invested the profits into the next thing, which was I'm gonna start over. So after Tommy Tucker's Tooth, like I said, instead of using the profits to pay off debt, and he decided to invest it into the next thing, which was a film called Alice's Wonderland. So it featured a live-action child actress playing Alice, and she was living in an animated world. So that was an interesting thing back then. They had done animated elements in live-action films, but I feel like this was the first one where it was a live-action person in an animated world. So speaking of Walt's great financial decisions, right after they finished editing Alice's Wonderland, Laugh-O-Grams filed for bankruptcy. So Walt took a train to Los Angeles for a fresh start and only had $40 and a suitcase with drawing materials and some clothes in it to his name. So in California, when he got there, he started sending out proposals for a series of films called the Alice Comedies, which of course was, you know, based on the Alice's Wonderland that he had just made, and was hoping to find a distributor to help fund the animation costs, and eventually signed with Winkler Pictures. It was run by Margaret Winkler and her fiance Charles Mintz, and after they signed an agreement, 57 Alice films were produced between 1924 and 1927. So 3 years.
That's
pretty nuts.
So many films.
Yeah. So the Alice comedies were pretty expensive to produce, of course, because of all the animation, plus they're having to pay 5% to the actress at the time. Her name was Virginia Davis. But Charles Mintz was wanting to lower the production costs for the next thing that they were going to have animated. So Walt and Ub Iwerks decided to end the series, the Alice series, and focus more on like strictly animation. And after losing the rights to Felix the Cat, Universal needed a new animated character. So that's when Walt and Ub created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And they signed a contract with Universal for some short films with him in them. And the first one was released in 1927 and was Walt's most successful project at the time. So after the success of Oswald, Walt took a train to negotiate with Charles Mintz for a higher budget to produce more Oswald cartoons. And rather than increase the budget, Mintz insisted that Walt take a 20% budget cut, and also told him that most of his animators had already signed on to Universal behind his back, with the exception of Ub and a few novice animators. So Walt refused the budget and decided to quit. But since Oswald's rights were held by Universal, he was forced to leave him behind, unfortunately. So on the train ride back, he decided to come up with a new cartoon, one that he was very adamant about keeping the rights for. Came up with the idea of a little mouse named Mortimer, but his wife Lillian did not like the name and suggested Mickey instead, and thus our mouse that we all know and love was born.
Does anybody see like how all of these important moments happen to him on trains? Like maybe if I take a train across the country, my life will get
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that's why he loves trains so much.
Maybe.
That's definitely like a prominent thing, is his love for trains and a lot of stuff, especially the Disney parks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thing with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit always kind of makes me laugh that, like, now that they, you know, fought to get the rights back from Universal, it's like the Disney company as a whole, like, held this grudge over all these years and fought to negotiate back for that.
Oh, I held it. Did y'all?
So after that, several Mickey Mouse shorts were made. Most people know of Steamboat Willie and Plane Crazy, and those films all led us up to the big one.
So I guess that leads us right into what's considered the golden age of Disney animation, which is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, The Reluctant Dragon, and Bambi. Which I guess we're probably going to end up talking more about like the ones that have actual animated features in them, I would imagine, because I think we've all seen stuff from each one of these, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many movies have we seen challenge? I know it was definitely not me.
I think Beth and I are tied.
Yeah, I think I was gonna watch one this weekend so that I could beat you, Mario, but I didn't have time.
All right, we'll have to tally it up at the end of because we're gonna end up doing part 2 on this. There's no way we're not going to, but we'll tally it up at the end, and I may have to plow through a couple movies just to beat you. The competition's on. So starting with Snow White and ending with Bambi, each one of these films was overseen by Walt, and it kind of established him as the studio itself as one of the leaders in the animated filmmaking industry, which I think is really awesome just because, you know, each film had his own personal touch on it. And while this is considered the golden age, technically each film in this movie was considered a box office financial flop, except for Dumbo and Snow White. Actually, Dumbo was supposed to be a short film originally, but because Fantasia did so bad at the box office, they moved it to a feature length just to recoup some of the losses. And,
you know, I went through and watched Dumbo again before. Oh, I say again, actually, I don't remember having sat down and watched it before this, which is why I decided to do it. But it's pretty obvious that they took a short and stretched it into a full-length motion picture. I realized
the exact same thing.
I am not a very big fan of Dumbo, having sat down and watched it recently.
It's so sad. I can't. It like makes me so upset. I cannot watch it.
It's weird because it's like on the one hand, like it's very sad almost the whole way through, but I feel like you don't really get to connect with Dumbo. I think a lot of it has to do with him not talking. But the other thing is that the ending doesn't really seem to reach a resolution for me. Like, his mom's still locked up. I'm assuming the like circus people are still taking advantage of him. Now he can just fly. They're probably going to do that even worse now. Like, I don't know. It wasn't a very happy movie for me.
Well, that brings us to an interesting point that I have on here too. A lot of Disney movies have that reputation for being like happy, upbeat, but this era is also known as the sugar and tar era because there's a lot of dark scenes in almost every one of these movies. And a lot of the reason that they still have that same Disney feel to them is because that dark scene is always squished between like a couple happy and bright moments throughout the film. So just noting that Dumbo has a lot of those, and thinking back to like even Snow White, there's some moments where that movie is like, just the animation itself is very dark.
Oh my god, that scene where she's in the woods.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And also what's terrifying is pink elephants on parade. They're trying to play that off like they were just drunk on alcohol. Okay.
I know. That's like a very prohibition of Disney right there. Like, oh my god, if you drink, you like hallucinate like that.
I was about to say, I have never had that much alcohol before.
New Drinking Around the World challenge, Beth.
I know, right? Once I start hallucinating, then I'll understand.
So, okay. The other cool thing about this is that this era, obviously with it being the first era of Disney animation, outside of like the couple of shorts that Walt did previous to this, we see a couple really big trends with that. Snow White's the first animated movie based on a fairy tale. Pinocchio is the first well-known literature piece turned into a child-friendly movie. Bambi was the first movie from the perspective of an animal. And they also had other Disney staples like exaggerated villains, the use of music, and comedic sidekicks. So this all is kind of the foundation of Walt Disney animation here. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's like super, super notable. But we also see with that the technique of multiplane technology used in a lot of these movies to create depth and add more of a realism to a lot of the scenes. So I thought that was really neat too.
Mm-hmm. And then another technique that was developed in this time was surround sound. Actually, I didn't realize this until I was doing research this week, but Disney called their version of surround sound Fantasound to be played with Fantasia when it was in theaters. And that was the first time that a movie used surround sound.
That's so crazy.
Did not know that.
Yeah, and it was not that many theaters ended up doing it because it was so expensive. So I think that the whole goal that they were going for kind of didn't work out like they wanted, and that might be part of the reason Fantasia didn't do as well.
Yeah. But I mean, I could imagine being in one of the areas like at that time and, you know, being able to listen to surround sound for the first time. It's like, you know, when it first moved from like mono to stereo sound, and then from stereo to something as big as that, I can imagine like how big that must have been to get to see that in theaters for the first time with something like surround sound.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I really think I need to go back and watch Fantasia now just because of that. I didn't know that at all.
I haven't seen it in a long time.
I just remember I was never really allowed to watch it when I was little because my mom hated it. So
it's a very interesting movie from what I remember.
I don't remember loving it, but I did. I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but I did really like Fantasia 2000.
But I don't remember that one. I know I've seen it, but I don't remember that one.
Yeah, I think it. I mean, I like both of them, but I think that I don't know, Fantasia 2000 was more interesting to me. But anyway, we'll talk about that later.
I think you had one more thing on here, Brian.
Oh, yeah, just another little fun fact was that when the studio was working on Bambi, Walt was very adamant about it being more realistic, at least with how the animals moved in the movie. So he had animal experts come in and give lectures to the animators, and he took them on tours of zoos. And the coolest thing that I saw was that the studio actually had 2 fawns that were donated, and they stayed at the studio, and they had a place set up in the back where they could run around, and the animators could observe them and how they ran to make their motion more realistic.
I think they should do that at every office.
I would certainly be much happier at work if there were like cute animals running around everywhere.
I just want to know, like, would that even be approved by today's standards? I feel like it wouldn't.
Well, they did it for Lion King too. Jeffrey Katzenberger had lions brought in. I mean, they didn't live there, but you know.
It's kind of terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, were they like full-grown lions?
Yeah, it was so they could practice drawing them.
Oh wow,
that's crazy.
So after that moves us to what's considered the wartime era, which a lot of people don't know a lot of the movies in here, and I'm very not surprised by. We have Saludos Amigos, The Three Caballeros, Make Mine Music, Fun and Fancy Free, Song of the South, Melody Time, and The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. I think out of all of those, Song of the South is probably the most famous for...
Famous.
Yeah, I was going to say we're infamous. A lot of these films are what are considered package films, where it's not really like a whole long story. It's a bunch of shorts kind of clumped together into just one big movie to kind of save budgets, really. This came at a time where, obviously the costs were pretty low, or the budget was pretty low for Disney animators after all of the losses from previous films. And at the same time, there was an animation strike that same year. So a lot of Disney's work had to be kind of crunched on a tight budget. This was also around the time of World War II, so that didn't really help Disney as well. I'm kind of jumping around here, but two of the films in here have a lot of heavy reliance on South American culture. And it was said, but I couldn't find like a whole bunch of source in there that Disney actually created those to help unite both Mexico, the US, and South America to kind of help them stay away from the Axis powers. And I'm really jumping around here. I shouldn't have done that.
You're doing better than me. I haven't seen a single movie from this era.
I've seen a couple, and I know Brian saw Saludos Amigos.
I watched the only one actually from this that I'd seen before this past week was Song of the South, and I sat down and watched Saludos Amigos and The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
So let me ask you guys, because it looks like Kirsten hasn't seen Song of the South either.
No.
How did you watch it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say
or
that,
rather, someone who isn't you, how would they go about finding it and watching it?
I'm gonna say that I'll send you the file in our group chat.
I will say, hopefully the NSA isn't listening, but I think I torrented it the first time that I watched it. But I have seen, if you search, there's usually like sites like Dailymotion, I think, oftentimes have it up. I think they probably get taken down a lot, but usually if it doesn't take too much of a search, or you just get kind of lucky and there happens to be one that hasn't been taken down yet up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say that I can really get that mad about it. It's not like we could buy it.
You can actually, but
wait,
not
what?
Yeah, there's copies of it all over eBay, but they're super expensive.
Okay, well, it's not like real people can buy it. Really?
Well, yeah, like Disney's not putting it out anymore.
Right. But I'm gonna say that I can send you it.
How bad is it? Like, I mean, I feel like it's this Disney like legend myth, like, oh, Song of the South, that you kind of just like talk about behind your mouth, but like, is it really like, I don't know, what's it like?
My personal opinion is that a lot of it is kind of overblown. Like, there's definitely, I will say, more or less one pretty insensitive part that, probably shouldn't be in there. And I'm not going to use the argument that like, oh, it was the time period. Like, it still doesn't make it right. But I think that it doesn't deserve the reputation that it's gotten for being this like insanely like over the top racist, or however you want to classify it. Like, it just, I think it's been way blown out of proportion.
I think I totally agree with that. And it's more of like a product of its time, I guess. Not to, that sounds like I'm making an excuse for it, but it definitely is like one of those things where you're like, okay, that's not entirely right, but if you remember what America was like in 1946, like there's not really much of a surprise there.
See, the way that I would say, like, if you look at something like the scene from Fantasia that was edited, I would say like that was without a doubt like racist and almost like malicious in the way it was presented. I don't think there's anything in Song of the South that is malicious, just not necessarily, you know, appropriate by today's standards.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So an interesting thing about Song of the South, I don't know if we talked about this, but back at, I think it was last year's D23, Whoopi Goldberg was, I think she was added into the Disney Legends or whatever, or at one of the Disney Legends panels. She mentioned trying to get Disney to bring back Song of the South just so that we could have a conversation about why it came out, what it was, and why it left Disney's history. And I think that says a lot if someone's more than willing to be like, let's not just like brush that away and put it behind closed doors like Disney really wants us to. And they actually want to have a conversation about it. I think that's a good thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I that's pretty much everything I've got on here. A lot of this stuff is kind of obscure context with like 6 smaller films packaged into one larger film.
You know, I really, really enjoyed Saludos Amigos, and I didn't really know that much about what it was before I even watched it, but I thought it was cool. It was a good like mix between education and, you know, entertainment, which we talk a lot about Disney doing well, but I enjoyed it. You know, I don't know how relevant it is today, but I felt like it was a cool look at South American culture at the time. And it was cool. I thought the animation was good and funny. It felt a lot like, you know, one of the sections of it is basically a Goofy short, but a lot of it felt like, you know, that kind of classic short animation that Disney did.
That's kind of how I felt about Three Caballeros. I think that one might be a little bit more on the like not traditional Disney side, but it definitely is a whole bunch of shorts, and it is a nice look at like the animation of that time period, maybe even some South American culture, because I don't know how accurate that is, but I really enjoyed watching that one, and that was a new one for my memory on this one.
I do think that it's interesting that if you ride the Grand Fiesta Tour and you haven't seen Saludos Amigos or the Three Caballeros, the only character you really know probably is Donald Duck, right? Like, were the other two in other things?
Well, they have not been to my knowledge, but I know that Disney did just put out a Three Caballeros series in another country, and there was a rumor that it might be coming to Disney, like Disney Channel. So like with the popularity in DuckTales, I know that they were like trying to really push Disney animation like television wise, but as far as like other content, I don't know if there's anything about Three Caballeros anywhere else. I'm gonna look that up because
yeah, that's really interesting because it's like a similar situation for Song of the South with Splash Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for that though,
at least you know you do have the like old, I don't know, fables or whatever you want to call them that are, you know, have the Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear and all them. Like I had heard those as a kid, and I've never seen Song of the South, but like as far as those specific versions of them, I guess.
And that's the other thing. I think with the Three Caballeros, like there's not a lot of context that's needed, but it's also significantly less context than you would have for, say, Splash Mountain. Like Splash Mountain at least tells you a cohesive story all the way throughout. You don't need to know who those characters are. You just kind of get to know them through the ride. The Three Caballeros, it's just, oh my gosh, I'm drawing, what's the red bird's name? I know Jose is the other one.
Oh god, it's something Pistoli because he's got the two pistols or something. I can't remember it off the top of my head.
I don't know, but the two of them looking for Donald. So it's kind of like you don't really know who they are, and that says a lot if we can't actually name who they are.
Yeah.
So side note, no, I don't. And there's actually a 2-movie collection that features both Saludos Amigos and Three Caballeros. So you may have to find that. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much it for the wartime era.
I want to say one thing before we move on. I think that it's really interesting also how the alcohol and the smoking and like more adult themed stuff it like was really, really prominent in this era, and then it like slowly started to like fade out and to the point where it's like not even in films anymore.
Well, it was funny. I was watching a like brief history walkthrough of Disney animation earlier, and they were talking about that, you know, the re-releases now, a lot of that's been edited out. And I guess I saw the older version of Saludos Amigos because there was tons of smoking and drinking and stuff in there. So, but yeah, it's like, wow, it's crazy how it's in almost every single one of these older animations in at least one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hate like smoke as much as the next person, but I feel like these movies are already setting a bad example. So why are they cherry picking? Like going and marrying people that they've known for 10 minutes? I think I'd rather smoke a cigarette.
New life motto.
Another thing that I actually totally forgot to mention was that alongside of all of the things that I listed before, Disney didn't really produce a lot of animated features in this time, mostly because they were heavily involved in creating content for the U.S. Army. There is a lot of that on the internet, and it's kind of interesting to look at.
It really is. I actually, the English class that I took in college was focused on, like basically not necessarily just propaganda, but how kind of media changed during World War II. And we watched some of the Disney shorts at this time, and it's really weird seeing like beloved Disney characters in these kind of propaganda films.
Well, it's funny. I don't think I actually linked the article that I meant to for this one. It might have been the Diz Avenue one, but there's pictures of like the war propaganda and stuff in there too. Like, oh yeah, here it is. It's one that's got like a war bond with all of the Disney characters around it.
Oh my God.
A Mickey Mouse flyer that says "Appreciate America" and it says "Come on, gang, all out for Uncle Sam."
Nobody gave Donald Trump this idea.
Well, and then the best part is the one that I did link has a picture from a U.S. short from that time period called "Donald Gets Drafted."
That's the one that I particularly remember, and it is it's pretty crazy.
It's just so funny to think. It's just so funny to think that Disney didn't like separate themselves from that. Instead, they were like, "Yeah, let's just help out."
See, I feel like at this day and age, not only that wouldn't happen, but even the stuff that's shown now that people kind of have enough foresight to think like, 10, 20 years, this isn't going to look good, you know?
Well, and that's like a lot of the research that I found about that was people like claiming Nazi propaganda and this and that. And it's like, well, you kind of got to think about the period and why it was the way it was and why Disney was really pushing these things. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just crazy to see how different it was.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, especially if you think of older generations in this day and age. Like, I feel like even now they would look back at this and not bat an eyelash.
So, go ahead.
Huh?
I thought you were going to talk. So I guess that brings us to our next era, which is the Silver Age of Disney animation, featuring films like Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, Sword in the Stone, and The Jungle Book. just I want to note here really quick that I was highlighting in our little tally over here of who's seen what films, and Brian and I were tied for wartime films with 3 movies, and no one else had seen anything. I'm not going to be able to keep up from this point out because there's just so many things that we've all seen.
Yeah. I'm going to be more interested to see what you guys haven't seen.
Yeah, Will was very appalled whenever I was going through. He was watching me and he's like, "You haven't seen this? You haven't seen that?" Like, oh my God.
I gotta say, Kirsten, I glanced through yours and I said the same thing.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking.
I was more surprised that Brian hasn't seen Treasure Planet.
Oh
my God.
That is
that is a great movie.
It's definitely one that I'm trying to hit before next week's show.
Oh my gosh, I feel like Treasure Planet is super underrated, but that's a different era, so let's stick to this one.
So for this one, this is probably one of the most well-known eras of Disney animation, which is why it's called the Silver Age or the Restoration Age. Disney returned to its full-length films instead of the package films with the 1950s release of Cinderella, and it had a $3 million budget, which is funny because Disney Studios was already $4 million in debt. And again, everything was riding on Cinderella. The movie turned a profit of $263.6 million at the box office. So it was definitely considered a success.
I'm looking at the inflation calculator to see what a $3 million budget would be today.
Yeah,
I'm curious about that.
Even in comparison to the fact that they had a $3 million budget on $4 million in debt, like $1 million difference is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But even the lowest grossing film in this section of movies, which was Alice in Wonderland, the lowest grossing film in this category, Alice in Wonderland, is considered a box office failure. However, after every time that they had a failure in this category, the studio would bounce right back. With this one, it was Lady and the Tramp, which actually became the highest grossing movie since Snow White. I don't have numbers on that, though.
The one thing that I read that was big during this time was obviously this was before a lot of people had, a way to watch movies at home, and they would just re-release ones that didn't do so well over and over again until they eventually made money back on them.
Okay, so Cinderella, made for $3 million in 1950, would be $31 million today, which seems like a pretty low budget, considering. But and I mean, really think about it. I looked up the Princess and the Frog budget just since that's the last drawn animation that we have, and that budget. Would anybody like to guess comparatively?
I'm gonna say it had to be probably close. I don't know anything about animation, so
105 million.
Oh wow!
Like, what?
So even when you account for inflation, things are just so much more expensive today, and things like that are. I mean, I'm very surprised. Anyway, it's my nerd.
Wow.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Even we could talk about this too. Sleeping Beauty, which I think you probably have a little bit of information on here, don't you, Kirsten?
No, Waking Sleeping Beauty is actually just about the Renaissance.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm going to skip right over that then. And I'll watch that before we start next week because I'm interested in that. But Sleeping Beauty was another box office failure technically for the animation company because the film itself cost over $6 million to produce and was in development for 4 years. So Walt tried to make this as big as he possibly could, using CinemaScope technology to create the film. And that was kind of at the same time where Walt decided to shift his focus to the park development a little bit. So he kind of stepped away from Sleeping Beauty a little more than he probably should have, which led to it being stuck in development hell for forever. But you can kind of tell a lot of these scenes were done or a lot of these movies were done at the same time because their backgrounds have a painter artistic feel to them, while also kind of keeping them a little bit otherworldly. You can kind of see that in the trees for Sleeping Beauty, where they're all different shapes and things. A lot of the backgrounds have somewhat of a realistic painted feel, but then there's that separation in the tree shapes. Then after that, this kind of like shifts almost right into the Dark Ages, because towards the end of this era, Disney started using a process called xerography, which is basically like photocopying, but in a way that it creates movies, to save money and speed up the process of animation. And that's why you'll see in the next era, a lot of the films have like a scratchy, sketched out feel. And this was also around the time when Walt passed. So that moves us right into the Dark Ages.
Appropriately named.
So did we want to talk about anything in there? Because I blew through that pretty quick.
Fun fact about xerography, the first movie it was used on was 101 Dalmatians, and the reason why it took off so much and why the animation studio loved it was that it helped them line up all the spots moving frame to frame with all the Dalmatians, which they said would have taken so much more time without the technology.
I also thought, like, I watched a video on like the animators drawing scenes for 101 Dalmatians, and it's really cool if you ever get a chance to like look it up on YouTube. I'll see if I can find it before we post this and put it in the show notes. But it's really cool how they did it, because it would actually like draw them on these transparent sheets of paper and then like photocopy that over the background scene and then like kind of erase a little bit of it and then move it. So it was like they were continuously drawing the cells as they were going, but the backgrounds were for the most part staying the same.
I saw there was a video that said that somebody went through like frame by frame and counted, and I don't know who did this, but there were like there would have been over 6 million basically spots that would have had to have been drawn by hand each frame if they'd have done that without using the xerography.
That's crazy.
That's absolutely insane. So the Dark Ages, the Aristocats, Robin Hood, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Rescuers, Fox and the Hound, The Black Cauldron, The Great Mouse Detective, and Oliver and Company. Very interesting era for Disney as a company.
Yeah.
So funny enough, a lot of people consider that, say this the Dark Ages because of the fact that one, Walt had passed and Disney kind of fumbled around without their head of the company. But mixed with that, it was also because they stayed away from the fairy tale movie style. And there was also a heavy use of xerography. And a lot of these movies have a very dark theme around them as well, which, I mean, is very noticeable in The Black Cauldron.
Oh, yeah. Another one that I just watched for the first time preparing for this. Like, holy crap. Did not feel like a Disney movie at all.
No.
I actually really liked that movie.
I did. I don't say that as like necessarily a bad thing, but it really didn't feel like anything I'd ever seen Disney do before.
I started it once and I fell asleep.
It's interesting because it definitely does not feel like a Disney movie at all. Kind of funny thing about that, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead in my notes here. At this point, a lot of we didn't really talk about them, but the 9 Old Men, which were like the core founding Disney animation team, they started to kind of retire around this period, and Disney took to hiring animators from CalArts. And this is the point where Don Bluth really came back to work for Disney. Tim Burton worked for Disney, John Lasseter and Glenn Kane. You can really tell, I mean, obviously we kind of grew up in the era where Disney and Don Bluth were kind of competing with each other. So just looking at that, you can really see his hand in a lot of the animation style from the movies of this period.
This is also towards the end of the dark era is when Eisner took over and Jeffrey Katzenberg. And it's when Roy E., which was Walt's nephew, his brother's son, eventually left at the very end. And I do have a couple things from Waking Sleeping Beauty. So it's kind of like also, I think, called the dark era because this is when they kind of pushed animation to the wayside. Like Roy E., he had left the company. He left the board, and then he came back in 1984 to run, and he wanted to run animation since people weren't really that excited about it. Enthusiasm was sort of waning. And soon after that happened, they hired Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Michael put him in charge of animation as well. And so there was just a big culture clash because Jeffrey Katzenberg is a terrible human being and Roy E. is not. Anyway, and so even like Eisner wanted the animation building for celebrity offices, because this is when they had a lot of celebrities making live action films for them, like Bette Midler, Lily Tomlin, those kind of people. So he took the animation building and moved all of the animators off the lot to this not so great neighborhood in Glendale. So, just kind of shows you like how the company felt about animation at the time.
Well, I'm going to cut you off for a second, because kind of off of that point, around this time, Eisner also really didn't want to focus on animation at all. And he almost cut the animation department completely around that time, after they had kind of started to shift the animators out of that office. And it wasn't until I think Roy E. came back and was like, hey, no, this is the heart and soul of Disney. We need to keep this alive. So it would be interesting to see where the Disney parks themselves would be if we didn't have that kind of shift in, because they were going to keep pushing on the parks and everything, but not the animation studio.
Yeah, I think it's really easy for people to forget that there was a time, not so long ago, that Disney was, as a company, was not doing very well. I mean, they had to ward off, hostile takeovers. And I mean, they weren't like the powerhouse that they are now. And I think people don't really remember that, especially people our age, because it happened, a few years really before we were born. It's kind of the time that was all going on. Mm-hmm. And then I have one more kind of interesting fact to lead us into next week's show. So is there anything else first about the era?
Just a couple little things in here. So Black Cauldron's actually considered one of Disney's lowest points, and we kind of touched on that a little bit. The film was met with mixed reviews, and it was actually their most expensive film to date at this point.
Had a $23 million loss at the box office.
And once again, if Disney hadn't released a critical success movie after that with The Great Mouse Detective, the studio really would have folded. And that's kind of more on like what Kirsten and I were talking about, how they were kind of thinking about folding the animation department in themselves. And I already kind of talked about it with Disney hiring animators from CalArts, but at the same time, around the time of the Black Cauldron, a lot of the animators were kind of frustrated because Disney was really bouncing off of that hand-drawn animation style. They were kind of flopping with different movies, and people were kind of jumping ship. And it's really funny to me that at this point, Don Bluth left, formed his own company. Tim Burton was basically fired, and John Lasseter was also fired from the Disney company, which obviously Tim Burton went on to make The Nightmare Before Christmas, and that was a kind of big movie for the Disney company. And then John Lasseter went off to make Pixar. I think that was a little bit later, though. And fun fact, he was actually fired for trying to push the company to invest in 3D animation technology.
That's interesting.
So he got fired and then left and went and made Pixar. But after Disney, after that whole shakeup and a lot of the animators left, Don Bluth, which I had mentioned earlier, went off to go open his own studio, and Disney actually competed against their former animator. For those of you that don't know, Don Bluth is one of the people behind some of the hits like All Dogs Go to Heaven, Anastasia, An American Tail, Fievel Goes West, The Land Before Time, and Thumbelina.
People, Anastasia is not a Disney movie.
It's very good, but yes, I hate when people say that she's a Disney princess. I'm like, she's not even Disney.
Well, and that's
although she could be soon.
And that's the kind of funny thing is, like, if you think about it, you can really see why people would think that, because her animation style is very similar to a lot of the animated films from this period, because Don Bluth worked on that. But yeah, no, she's not a Disney princess.
Side note, because it's related to Anastasia, because Anastasia is owned by 21st Century Fox, and they are, you know, in the middle of this merger. Obviously, I guess we don't know exactly what Disney's gaining and whatever, but what is your guys' opinions on when people try to say that acquired princesses are Disney princesses? Do you hate it or do you loathe it?
It definitely annoys me. I don't think if it was like created under Disney, it's not like
it shouldn't count.
Yeah.
If Disney's not using it, it shouldn't count, is how I feel. Like, I don't
like Princess Leia.
Yeah. I love Princess Leia. Like, who doesn't love Carrie Fisher? Like, if you don't love her, don't talk to me. But like, she's not a Disney princess. She's just not. Like,
right.
The end.
See, I'm like on kind of the borderline of that. I don't disagree with you guys, but I also think like I can see where that comes in because Disney has been releasing Star Wars films. So there it's kind of like a gray area for me. Like if for some reason Disney decided to come out after this merger and say, hey, we're going to release Anastasia 2, which I don't know why they would do that, but Disney's done a couple things.
Anastasia 2.
Maybe there is. I don't know.
They're going to release 3.
Yeah, they're going to release a new Anastasia movie. Then it would kind of fall in that gray area where I'm like, okay, well, Disney's actually releasing this movie. I can guarantee it probably wouldn't be good, but Disney's releasing this movie.
I think that they could make a good Anastasia movie, and I would not be opposed to it at all. But even if they did, I would still argue against it because she was not created.
Yeah, she's not the brain
by Disney.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, technically, she wasn't created by 21st Century Fox either, because she was a real person. But you know, the character, at least.
Well, I mean, if you're going to get that technical, then a lot of the people we consider Disney princess aren't.
Right. The character version.
How do y'all feel then about Nightmare Before Christmas? Because that, in a way, kind of falls into that gray area too.
I'm more okay with that because it was Touchstone, which was owned by Disney from the beginning. But I definitely wouldn't consider it a Disney film. And I love Nightmare Before Christmas. I really do. But
never seen it.
Oh my God, what?
It's not my favorite, but I'm still very surprised that you haven't seen it.
I know.
I'm not entirely surprised, but but no, I think it's cool to watch just for the fact that it's entirely stop motion technology. If you're gonna watch it though, there's obviously who watches DVDs anymore? But well, actually, sorry, I remember watching it on VHS, so maybe that's what I'm thinking about. But at the end of the VHS, there used to be a clip that was like the creation of Nightmare Before Christmas, and they showed you how they went through and like all of the faces that they had for Jack, and they would literally just pick them up and swap them out. And then stuff like the scale of the actual set with Tim Burton in the middle of it. So like that's really cool to check out.
Yeah, for sure.
But other than that, I'm not really super surprised you haven't seen it.
I just really, really hate stop motion animation. Like I hate it so much. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Have you ever seen Coraline?
No. Oh, that would scare me. Like, okay,
oh my God, it's so good.
No, and I hate stop motion animation. So that's part of the reason I've never watched it. Like I want to see it. I know I should see it, but I don't know if I can sit through whatever 90 minutes of stop motion.
So good.
I don't know how you feel on Danny Elfman too, but I think this is like the most Danny Elfman movie ever as far as the soundtrack.
This is like kind of off topic, but as I've said before, I'm a music geek. And 8th grade was the first year I ever did marching band, and that year I only joined because we were doing a Nightmare Before Christmas show.
Nice.
I was also in band, and we did a Pirates of the Caribbean show my 10th grade year.
Ooh, that sounds cool.
We didn't do anything cool when I was in band, but I never marched, so I guess maybe that's why.
I was on color guard, so
that still counts.
I twirled like a rifle, and that year we twirled boat oars.
That's really cool. Mario, what did you play?
I played clarinet in high school.
Okay.
I was Squidward. But yeah, that was the entire reason I joined. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to join that.
Yeah.
If we were in band, like, we
reason.
had to march. There was no option.
They separated it for us. Like my middle school, like in 7th and 8th grade, you didn't have the option to join until 8th grade, and then you could join the marching band, or you could just kind of stay in what they called the concert band, which was like the elective version of it.
Well, we had a really small school, so.
I also had a really small school, but ours was still split. But
Okay,
So
you ready for my
back
last
to-
fact, or is there anything else?
yes, go to your last fact.
Okay, this will lead us into next week. We'll start with the Disney Renaissance. So, one thing they did really at the very end of the Dark Age was to stop. Before that, the Disney Vault had been a thing where every 7 years they re-released a movie into the theater. Like now we know the Disney Vault as every 7 years you can buy it on DVD or whatever. And so this is when they decided to not do the re-release in theater, and they started releasing movies on VHS. And they tested it with Pinocchio, and it made like a ton of money. So obviously they thought like, well, this is great. We need to start making more and more movies so we can release them on VHS and make more money. So to start coming up with like more ideas, they had gong shows where animators could present their ideas for a new movie. And some got greenlit really easily, really fast. Like Pocahontas was just a title and one drawing. And then some were gonged a couple times and then eventually given another chance. And one of those was The Little Mermaid. And then some were things that had been considered years earlier by Walt himself and had actually never been made movies. And that example is Beauty and the Beast. So.
Oh, that's interesting. So gong is bad, right?
Yeah, if they gonged it, like if you were doing your presentation and you got the gong, then they were like, no, we're not using your idea. So Little Mermaid got gonged, I think, multiple times before they finally gave it a chance. So
that's crazy. It's such an iconic film, almost, didn't get made.
Yeah.
If you kind of want to laugh about that a little bit too, Tim Burton had pitched Disney the concept of Frankenweenie, and he got gonged for that.
Well, he should have gotten
surprising?
gonged for that.
But yeah, that was actually the film that got him fired from Disney too. So
Good.
Sounds about right.
No.
So that was a fun little walk through Disney animation. Is there anything that you guys want to talk about on these first couple eras before we tie up this week?
It's weird to see like Disney start at this like great height and kind of, I don't know, at least in my opinion, kind of slowly start slipping down through the years until we get to where we are next week.
I also think it's funny that like kind of to that point, when Disney wasn't like in a downward decline, they were just stabilizing.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
seriously.
yeah. They were in a sinking lifeboat, just like dumping buckets of water out the side.
Yeah.
Right. Like, who would have thought that Disney would have been sitting here trying to like keep themselves afloat after like one horrible movie, just because we lived through some of the most successful Disney movies of all time.
Yeah. And it's weird to think, I mean, like looking at it, I think a lot of people enjoy the Renaissance. I know I definitely do. And I don't know how much of that is just growing up in the middle of it and those movies being such a big part of my childhood. But I feel like if you really look back at the periods before this, I mean, the number of like what I would consider truly iconic movies is not that much. I mean, good ones certainly, but I mean, outside of really like Snow White, Cinderella, maybe Peter Pan, and a few others, like a lot of these were not like hugely relevant movies.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of the reason that they're successful today still is because of the history behind them. Like we were talking about with Dumbo, like that's not a really great movie, but
No.
thinking about it and how it really did help save the money that they lost from Fantasia, like that's in itself is enough to make it a Disney classic, I think.
I think Disney really benefits from nostalgia, and like they've been around so long that, you know, my parents have different memories. I mean, even I'll talk about Cher here, like her first memory, like knowing that she wanted to be in show business was like going to the theater and seeing, I think, Dumbo.
That's crazy. I mean, because like say Cinderella
it wasn't born yet. It had to have been Cinderella. She's talked about that. Sorry, she's mentioned both of them, but no, going to the theater and seeing Cinderella, and like that was what made her know she went. And like, I mean, so that's like old people, you know, everybody just has these memories of their childhood, and like it's easy to forget the bad ones. Like when we think about Disney, we think about, oh my God, they've made so many amazing animated movies, but like you're not thinking about, you know, the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Like it's easy to forget the big ones. You forget all the flops.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know, I wonder, think if Cinderella hadn't had been as wildly successful as it was, you know, would we still like regard Snow White and Pinocchio and the other ones that did well before that, like today? If Disney had gone under, you know, with
I don't think so.
Ichabod and Mr. Toad being their final masterpiece that they put out, would we? It's funny to think, you know. I wonder how much of that is based on the fact that Disney did make it. They continued making other, you know, good movies over the years, and we think back to the really good ones, or if they would have kind of just been lost to the ages. Because I mean, like, what other movies that came out in the, you know, 30s and 40s do you really think that much about?
And I think, like you said,
Light on Parade or whatever, because it was in Great Movie Ride. But no, I think they definitely would not be. I think it would just be like a memory.
And I think along with that, Disney benefits not only from nostalgia, but the legacy with it too. Like, you know, you go see, let's say, Moana, and you know immediately that that's a Disney movie because that's got the Disney Castle logo. All of those movies tied with that one singular thing, everyone's always like, oh, you know, this is a Disney movie. And even going back and thinking like, oh, I want to watch maybe a Disney movie or something today, you go back and you look at like some of the classics, and, you know, just having that umbrella of this is a Disney movie, I think is enough to kind of stabilize it.
Well, and there wouldn't be a Disney World today if they had gone under during that period. I mean, it didn't exist, so people really wouldn't care because it wouldn't be like this magical, you know, place where every single kid in the world wants to go.
So my question to you guys, I know like I briefly touched on it before. I know when we were talking about the Dark Ages, and I said that Disney kind of almost closed their animation studio entirely after the Black Cauldron. At that point, obviously Eisner's like working on the parks and everything. That's where his interests lie. What do you think the parks would be like today if we didn't continue to see Disney movies come out? Do you think they would still have those classic animation rides and they'd continue to push those IPs? Or maybe Disney would actually have parks that would all be original ideas?
I will tell you this. I really think that they would just keep on hounding away at the old stuff if they hadn't kept making good films. And I'll tell you why. And Kirsten, I don't know if you've ever been to Carowinds.
No, I never got to go. I really wanted to, though.
Okay, so there's a theme park on the border of North and South Carolina called Carowinds, and they have, like, at one point, I think they've acquired some new characters since then, but at one point a few years ago I went, and it was like the most irrelevant characters, like Woody Woodpecker and like Rocky and Bullwinkle, and I was like,
that one section in Universal.
Yeah, I was like, they have no idea who those characters are.
Well, you know, I even wonder with Six Flags and the Looney Tunes, like, how many kids are watching Looney Tunes nowadays?
I see those walking around Six Flags here in Dallas, and it's, you know, I don't think it has the same draw. But then again, I think we're also really spoiled because of Disney. So like if we saw it with fresh eyes as somebody who hadn't spent so much time at like the best theme park in the world, like would it still be kind of a novelty thing, you know, or not?
I think it might actually end up like a novelty thing. Like you were saying, they're not even a novelty thing, but it would end up probably like a Six Flags or something like that. Just because, they have those IPs, and then there were, obviously at this point we had some classic attractions, but if Disney really didn't focus on their storytelling, which is a huge thing for a lot of us in the Disney parks, that all might have been lost too.
Man, thank God for Roy E. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Michael Eisner.
No.
That was sarcastic, if you couldn't tell.
All right, so my question to you guys, what is maybe your top 3 films from the eras that we've discussed?
Oh, man.
Oh, okay, I gotta scroll through this list for a second. That's not right.
I'm gonna have to say, I would say top 3: Snow White, Pinocchio, and probably Cinderella.
I'm gonna go Fox and the Hound.
Wow.
It's so sad.
I know, it's like sad and scary. That scene with the bear used to terrify me as a kid.
Cinderella and I don't know. I can't decide between Oliver and Company.
Oh, Kirsten! Wow, so close to me. And this is funny because I'm thinking about it now, and it's definitely on your point that all of my favorites are tied to nostalgia. But I'm gonna say Peter Pan, Fox and the Hound, and Robin Hood, with an honorable mention of The Jungle Book and Oliver and Company.
I can't even watch Robin Hood. It makes me cry. The poor bunnies.
Oh my God,
they don't have any money.
So do you guys want to hear a really weird fact about me and The Jungle Book? This movie terrified me as a little kid, and I still think that it's only because of the snake, which may also be why I don't like snakes too much.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love snakes, so I would say that my 3 would probably be, not in any particular order, The Jungle Book, The Aristocats, and Oliver and Company.
I really need to watch The Aristocats. I've never seen it.
Oh my God, it's so good.
This is a common theme.
Yeah.
So wait, let's look at this one too. Which movie were you guys the most surprised to see that someone on this list hadn't seen from this era?
Oh boy, let me pull the list up.
Because I don't think I'm too surprised about this one. What was that?
I said this is going to be everybody make fun of Kirsten.
I'm surprised.
That's what I would say is I was very surprised when I saw that you hadn't seen Aristocats.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you haven't seen Winnie the Pooh, Beth.
Maybe I have. I don't know. I feel like they've made
so many. Give her that extra point.
I feel like they've made so many Winnie the Pooh movies that I may or may not have seen any particular one. I know I've seen the Tigger movie, but that's the only one I could say is definitively I know I saw it. So maybe I should go back and watch some clips, and maybe I did see it. But
this whole question stemmed from the fact that I thought none of you had seen Bambi, but I keep looking at The Reluctant Dragon. So I'm sorry about that. I don't know. I'm not super surprised about any of these, actually.
Yeah, I think that's going to fall apart next week when we see all these
Ryan.
straight to DVD. Mario, I can't believe you haven't seen Atlantis: Milo's Return.
Oh, garbage.
Well, Brian hasn't seen Pocahontas 2: Journey to a New World.
Also garbage.
Also, Brian and Kirsten haven't seen The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2.
What? Oh, 2. I thought you were saying the first one. I was like, what?
No, the second one. We're talking about straight to
I'm
DVD.
pretty surprised that Brian hasn't seen Treasure Planet, even though it's a trash movie.
It's a great movie.
It's so good though.
So I haven't seen it yet. Obviously, I've heard it's like visually really cool, but the storytelling is kind of meh.
No, the storytelling is great.
It's literally Treasure Island in space.
It's
way cool. It's a way cooler Treasure Island.
I already know the answer to this because it was the best movie ever, but is it better or worse than Muppet Treasure Island?
Oh.
I didn't even know there was a movie called Muppet Treasure Island.
Oh my god, are you kidding me right now?
No.
You have to watch it. It is
You should watch
best Muppets movie ever.
Yeah, that is a really good one, but I love Treasure Planet and I'm biased, so.
Side note, since we're on this kick of let's do some history shows, can we do a history of the Muppets in the park?
Oh,
that would be
yes,
fun one.
That'd be great.
A salute to all nations.
Salute to all parks, but mostly Magic Kingdom.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
So I pretty much am just going to tie it up at that. I figured that that's a good place to end it, unless we had another question.
No, I think we're good.
Sounds good.
Cool. And let me stop recording.